Welcome. Another episode of Dropkick Basement coming at you, your favorite pro wrestling history podcast. My name is Mike Madden. Happy to have you listening on with us. And my tag team partner in crime, Tommy Schultz. Tommy, how are you today?
Mike, I am quite excited because the boys in the basement have a first.
This is, we are, we're taking a leap outside of the normal, our lists and our little, rebooking games and all the fun stuff to actually, we're gonna have a guest. We have a guest. Somebody actually showed up at the basement with us to participate and talk about their pro wrestling career. So this is exciting. A long-time, close personal long-time friend of mine. We're going to bring him on in a couple seconds and chat with him about his illustrious career and the different stories and ins and outs that he's had through his traverse. So, Tommy, I feel like we're real journalists today.
It feels like, we're going to open the side door of the basement. We're going to let a guest in the back, and we're going to have quite a time.
This should be fun. So, without further ado, allow us to bring on our guest, Crazy Charlie Saunier, a.k.a. White Trash, a.k.a. my friend Chuck, legend of the NWA Wildside territory and other Georgia independents. Crazy Charlie, welcome to the basement.
From Heckleman Street all the way to the basement, fellas, I can finally say I've done something. What that is, I don't know, but I'm here.
Well,
welcome.
We're super glad to have you on here. This is so as I briefly mentioned, you and I are childhood friends, and it's funny that one of the connecting tissues to that childhood friendship happens to be professional wrestling, which you have been involved in as a worker, as a backstage guy, as a producer, and then now in the last 3 years, Tom and I have launched this podcast to talk about the history of wrestling and to finally put a voice and to a certain extent a face to the stories, the countless stories that I've told about you to Tom and other friends of ours that are closely tied to the show. So this is basically I haven't been lying about my childhood friend being a pro wrestler. Proof is in the pudding. So bring us up to speed. With your, we know what your current life as a radio broadcaster, a podcaster, and a production guru. That had to start somewhere. So, with your fandom of pro wrestling, tell me where you sort of you got a little bit of the itch, so to speak, in watching wrestling and then wanting to become involved in it.
Like every kid in America, I became obsessed with WrestleMania. Then WrestleMania 2, I convinced my parents to buy WrestleMania 5 and host my first ever wrestling party. From there, it was winning the New Jersey Northeast whatever title we invented out in the backyard over at Frank Goss's house as part of the Holy Family Professional Wrestling League. And then right about 30 years ago, almost to the hour that we are speaking right now, Mike Madden drives up to my house on Heckleman Street, and he says, "Get in the car." And I said, "Where are we going?" And he says, "Philadelphia, the bingo hall."
Yeah.
Had no idea what any of that meant, but I trusted Mike because he had, frankly, almost always steered me wrong, but never killed me. Never killed me. So therefore, jump in the car, go to Philadelphia, go to the bingo hall. Hell yeah. I went for my first adventure, and little did we know, by the end of the night, I would be carrying a pallet to the ring for a weapons match, and I'd be driving home with the fantasy in my mind of being the next great ECW superstar. That's how it all happened.
Well, so here's a one detail that you missed. So that trip to Philly, here's a little bit more backstory on that trip to Philadelphia. Our other friend and my other podcast partner, the captain Michael Corby. He was supposed to go. He had the ticket that you were given to go to ECW that day. There was no advance tickets. He was coming along for the ride. But he had a car accident the day before, and his car was messed up, and he wasn't feeling great. So he was like, you know what? I'm not going to go. He said, can you find somebody on short notice? I said, I just happen to have the lunatic in mind. So so that's how Chuck got involved. The other detail that you missed was you did drive your truck.
That's right, because that's how I got the chairs out of the ECW arena and back to Union Beach. Was in the bed of that pickup truck.
So that was
these are facts. First ever professional wrestling show, and I bring a pallet to the ring that I brought from the alleyways of whatever neighborhood of Philadelphia that is, and then I steal a bunch of chairs and throw them in my truck and drive back to New Jersey, going through the toll booths, talking about, that's it, I found my path. I'm going to be the next big thing in pro wrestling, and that's the trip of a lifetime. I truly cannot believe such 130-degree beginnings turned into such a life run here that I've been on.
Yeah, and that's crazy. Like it was Heatwave 95, and it was meant that for a reason. It was so hot in that building.
No air conditioning.
And they had during intermission, you were able to go outside, and they opened up like fire hydrants on both sides of the street. To cool everybody down. But yeah, the weapons filled cage match between Public Enemy and the Gangstas was the official main event that night, and it was Bring the Weapons. And Chuck, being a smart guy, ran off the bleachers. We were kind of high on the bleachers, but he just jogged down, the side off the bleachers, knew that pallet was there, and like an inspired brain, he was like, I'm going to do that. Then he gets a free ECW T-shirt from one of the sweaty regulars that saw him bring the pallet. Pallet made it in the ring. So if you ever watch that, I think it's on the Peacock Network on the ECW. Okay. They have a whole bunch of like the ECW the major arena shows. So if you ever watched Heatwave 95, you will see the pallet in the ring. It was never used. But it is stationed there, and that always makes me laugh and smile about that experience that we all had in the hottest building in South Philadelphia that day. So you get the bug, and you say to yourself, and at the time, what are you, 17, 18 years old at this point?
18.
Yeah.
Just finishing up high school.
Yeah, and so you get the itch, so to speak, to potentially pursue wrestling. And you moved to Georgia, right? Oh, no, South Carolina first, right?
South Carolina, and it happens in the strangest ways, like these stories always do. I go to the local arcade at the Anderson Mall, and I run into the newest local wrestler, Damian Steele, who, of course, immediately offers me an opportunity to become. I sounded knowledgeable. I had been watching a lot of wrestling and trading a lot of tapes at the time. I sounded knowledgeable, and he wanted a discount on his wrestling training, so he offered me a chance to come to his wrestling school up in Greer, South Carolina, at a roller skating rink, the home of Southern Carolina Wrestling, not Southern Championship Wrestling, who, of course, was suing Southern Carolina Wrestling over the letters SCW at the time, because naturally that's the business. So that's it. I go to the arcade. I find myself getting picked up and taken to my first training session just a couple days later in Greer, South Carolina, where I, within minutes, had an understanding of the industry, the business, and how it worked that I don't know that any other trainee had. And we can easily get into one of my most favorite stories of all time, my training.
Yeah, go ahead. If you got a good story, we want to hear a good story, my friend.
So the first day of training, they roll everybody in. They collect the $25 from every new entrant that wants to get in, which is how the wrestling school primarily stays open. There's about 8 of us in the ring that first morning. Damian Steele gave me a ride to my first training session. So he gave me at least a little bit of foreknowledge that they were going to try to make us all quit on the first day so they could keep the $250 and then start over again the next weekend with another 8 guys and make another $250. It was a pretty good cyclical scheme. Understanding that this was totally a work from the start, they say, all right, trainees, go run 2 miles outside in the neighborhood. So they tell us the route. Immediately we take off. It's a little downtown square area with some buildings about 3 stories high. I make it about, 4 buildings down, realize there's an alley, jump down the alley, hide, dump a bunch of water on myself, come out the other side, right back, go right back into the training facility. And I'm like, oh, man, wow, yeah, that was tough. And everybody's throwing up except for me. So my first moment in pro wrestling, I worked the workers, and I felt, I got to tell you, it felt pretty good to know that feeling from moment one. I was like, kid, if you can figure this out physically, you might just have a future in this.
Carney at the start for sure.
Wow.
Hey, when you live next to Keansburg, New Jersey, you develop a little bit of carny streak in you no matter what. So that was just the pro wrestling business meeting Keansburg right there.
Yeah, right. That's a terribly specific point, but those who know will know. So so you start training there. Anybody that we would know that was in and out of those training sessions?
No, but the Super Destroyer was the trainer at the time, and there's some question of whether he was the original masked Super Destroyer, but Buck Forrest, his real name, was my trainer, and nobody else came out of that particular training school, training academy. It was a roller skating rink with a ceiling of about 9 feet high. Okay. So I was literally the only sized professional wrestler that could train there, even reasonably successfully. I stayed there just long enough to live out my first gimmick, which I know you have always loved.
It's one of my favorites.
I was able to get my own, what they call creative control these days, and I did not have certainly in the first 6 months. So a character was offered to me about 8 weeks into training, and I was told, if you'll take this character, you get a heavyweight title match in your first match, and you main event on your first show. And I said, God damn it, I don't care what it is, sign me up.
Yeah.
Like Matt, what did I agree to?
So this is, again, you'd sent me a tape.
Again, you sent me a tape.
You sent me a tape. It's
you sent me a tape.
What year are we like? Was this 98?
This is 90, early 98.
Early 98. Okay. All right. Late 97, early 98. Yeah. It was the tape was like 3 matches and then like a little bit of like even I think there was like training footage in there that you had sent me that somebody had shot, and the gimmick was Stevie Flamingo. And I was like, how is Chuck, who's this sort of like feral child, when we were growing up, like you were younger than myself. Our other good friend Mike Muniz, who lived on Heckelman Street across the street from you. We were a little bit older than you, and you were sort of like at that time sort of like our fun mascot to like hang out with. Like Chuck will do stuff like he'll make prank phone calls, or like he'll stand lookout if we need like to, sneak over to the school and make sure the nuns aren't there. Like he'll cause a distraction. So then when the tape comes and it says Best of Stevie Flamingo, and it's got like 3 or 4 matches, I'm like, how did they convince you to? And obviously, like this is the origin story of that character. You were in training and got a heavyweight title match immediately, but this was the flamboyant. You had a boa.
Yes.
And it was a pink leotard, like top to bottom. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Oh yes, full.
And it was like I think like even after we had a phone conversation after I got the tape, and you were like, "So what do you think?" I was like, "How did they convince you to do this?" So we know that it had to do with the position on the card, but in your brain, is this just like, all right, like, I'm going to be Stevie Flamingo forever?
Never thought about it that far in advance.
Okay.
It was, I had been training, I had been working really hard, and they came to me with somewhat of an emergency need because they had written this show and this character, and the guy who was supposed to take the character got cold feet, naturally, as many people might in South Carolina, rural South Carolina, and I had no problem with it at all. I figured since I was there to do the basics, since I was there to learn wrestling holds and do wrist locks and drop kicks and make guys look good, that it really didn't matter what the character was that I played. I wanted to be on the show. I wanted to get bookings, and honestly, I bought into it so quickly, so much, that people appreciated the enthusiasm. And while it may have looked rather silly, I did get to tag with Leilani Kai. I was quite a famous name on a Christmas show, and I got to have my makeup done by a whole bunch of really cool wrestling people, and it was a lot of fun for the 6 months I got to do it. But clearly it wasn't destined to be. But Stevie Flamingo had one great boa and one hell of a drop kick. Just not a very good win-loss record, but getting a title match, main eventing on my first ever show, and Steve Stampede let me call the finish. It's a pretty amazing moment in time that the heavyweight champion, who was the local cable installer, who had been the heavyweight champion for like 8.5 years straight in this company, main evented every show in history, allowed me to call the finish, and I called a diamond cutter off the second rope, and I thought it came across good, even though I might have knocked 2 of my front teeth loose in my first match. Hell, it was a heavyweight title match, my first show, and I got to call the finish. So it was pretty over, even though I was wearing pink and dancing the sweet transvestite.
Yeah, that's right. So this is remind me, what was the name of the promotion that you had kind of started in? SCW?
Southern Carolina Wrestling.
Okay.
Yes,
right.
SCW. Not that SCW in Puerto Rico. Don't get me sued.
Okay. But so how long were you with them, and how long were you Stevie Flamingo at that point?
Okay, so this happens really fast. I got into kind of a couple of angles with the top guys in that company who were, at the time, moving around the state and starting to work their way around the region. It was the Boogaloo Crew, Scotty Wren and JC Daz, who were honestly, I really wish we had a lot of time to discuss those guys, because the tag team wrestling of today, which was popularized truly by like the Motor City Machine Guns, the Boogaloo Crew back in 97, 98 were doing that in the upstate of South Carolina on Wildside Television. And they kind of adopted me because I bumped my ass off for those guys, and I put them over a whole lot. So they started taking me to Greenville, South Carolina, to Spartanburg, South Carolina. Eventually made my way out to Columbia and worked for Moolah a couple of times.
Oh, really?
And it was APW Television is where I made my first TV debut for Chief Jay Eagle, and that's where everything takes off. So the Boogaloo Crew and Jamie Tucker, the referee that went on to WCW Stardom and other levels, those 3 guys kind of took me around to the other indies around South Carolina, got me into Georgia, and then that's where everything takes off. That's where my own creative control comes, is when I started running with those guys pretty much full time. And man, that was a wrestling clinic. JC Daz is one of those wrestlers who could wrestle the Invisible Man and truly convince even the most hardcore worker that there was an actual Invisible Man in there with him. I saw him do it. It was mind-blowing. He was one of the most unique and genius talents of the time. It's just a shame he didn't have the body or the size for 1997, but he had the mind that would go on to be what pro wrestling is for the next 20-plus years. Yeah,
I did like when I would get tapes and it would have extra match. It wouldn't just be your matches like that you would send. You started sending, like, you got to check these guys out, more or less like when you moved over to MCW, and then subsequently when that became NWA Wildside. But yeah, the Boogaloo Crew was great. Damian Steele himself was a good, like, again, first, second match worker. You had a good crew there. Couple guys that I guess, like, once you get to Georgia, like, you said you were on television more, and you started to get tagged up in these multi-man matches with, the guys, the likes of K-Quick or K-Crush, right? Ron Killings.
Yes, in APW in Spartanburg, South Carolina, my first television, that's where I meet Ron Killings. And I didn't get it at first. I'm not afraid to admit this. Maybe back in the day, I would have been a little more demonstrative. But at first, when I first came across him, I didn't get it. But I would go on to work with him for a couple of years. And trust me, I fully understood what the whole universe understands about the persona and the character and the gimmick. Now, I lost at the Shamrock Cafe to Ron Killings. Really fabulous match. Had a lot of good TV appearances there, but it was the play-by-play guy for APW television, Steve Martin, Mr. Wildside, the star maker, the father, the creator of NWA Wildside. Before that, it was just NCW. He would watch me week after week, and one week he asked in the back, hey, anybody want to do a quick 30, 45-second filler promo? Sometimes I need extra stuff for the end of these episodes just to make things round out. And Jeff G. Bailey, who had kind of taken me under his wing in APW, because I was smart enough to cozy up to him from day one because he was the most over guy there and the smartest guy there, and I knew he was going places, so I immediately snatched onto his wing. But he nudged me instantly. He said, go cut a promo. I grabbed a cookie sheet. I ran out to the entrance ramp, and I said, what do you want me to talk about? He goes, just put over the company. And I just started bashing myself in the head with a cookie sheet. And I said, that's what you'll see here at APW. That kind of action. That's hardcore. And he says, cut. Perfect. Walks up to me and he says, have you ever thought about coming to Cornelia, Georgia and working for NCW? And I think everybody on this broadcast knows that was my golden ticket. NCW invite was everybody in the region wanted to be there. All of the hottest talent was starting to percolate and pop up down in that building. It was Mr. Wildside himself, Steve Martin, coming off of recruiting the Hardy Boys and Bull Buchanan and Shannon Moore and Shane Helms, and that was the first generation of NCW. And as they started to pop, he replaced them with little old White Trash and JC Daz and Scotty Wren from the Boogaloo Crew and this kid that he found doing flips on down at the high school named AJ Styles, and he got Ron Killings to come down from North Carolina. And before the end of that summer, it was the hottest independent in the country, and my God, was it a delight to be a part of.
And you're not kidding when you say that. As far as like notoriety of the indies at the time, obviously there's a lot of people that had love for the Northeast Indies. So you had your Northeast Indies that were always going to have, like, people were going to talk, you have to go see, again, that's the kind of the beginnings of Jersey All Pro right around that time. You've got Maryland Championship Wrestling, East Coast Pro Wrestling as well. So the pockets of in the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic, and then out west you had Roland Alexander's group out in California. But it was really like that MCW. I'm sorry, NCW or MCW?
Yeah, N
okay.
National.
Right, National Championship Wrestling. So because you guys had television and you had strong television, and people would, if this was still in the days of tape trading, so there would be tapes that would have your TV, out as these like indie compilations, and I think like that's that sort of like kind of hit the crest. I would say 99 to 2001 would be like where a lot of that buzz sort of like really populated, and it started to be, you're starting to get mentioned in the same conversations with Ohio Valley Wrestling, which was predominantly, a standalone outlaw indie on its own, then gets a connection to be a developmental territory for WWE. And I guess like maybe it's more of the Wildside connection, but you did have a little bit of an affiliation with WCW at the time, correct?
Yes, we did. As a matter of fact, you go back to the summer of 99, still NCW. By the end of the summer of 99, things had blown up to a point where the building is over capacity. turnaway crowds, more and more really, really important future workers are starting to show up just at the doorstep. The Briscoe brothers, you never would have thought about it at the time, but there's the Briscoe brothers in their matching singlets sitting in the back. And what are they going to do? Well, they're just going to go out there and wrestle each other for 5-8 minutes before the show starts tonight. And who would have ever known that the Briscoes would go on to become such a thing? But we had so much talent in the room that's where Bill Behrens comes in with his syndication expertise. Yes, we were on TV in a handful of markets, and the most important one being Atlanta, the home market for all of Georgia. So having that presence meant we had full buildings all the time, no matter where we went in Georgia. But with Bill Behrens' expertise coming in and all of his years of working with the NWA, he goes ahead and gets us on nationwide syndication almost overnight. So
wow.
I go in and work one taping, and we're on in Atlanta and 2 or 3 other small markets. I come in for the next taping, and there's a list on the wall of where you can find the new NWA Wildside television show all across America. And I'm suddenly getting phone calls from my cousin at Seton Hall at 2:30 in the morning that says, I can't believe what I'm watching on television right now, but you're on TV.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you guys, being from Jersey and getting that call, it's one of the coolest things that's ever happened. So yes, we blew up huge over the summer of '99, and it was all the very beginnings of mixing that classic pro wrestling with all of the new wave of wrestling, and also bringing that hardcore element in a more stylized way than some other promotions were starting to go too far over the top. We were still trying to incorporate it as part of the wrestling promotion and show, and that was just the division that I was a part of. So yes, we always had a component of hardcore, as it was mostly known back then. Deathmatch was almost a word you never said when it came to that, except for that Taipei deathmatch that I had booked that the guy chickened out of. But we had classics like AJ Styles and Air Paris going up against each other for 30 straight minutes before you got a hardcore match, before you got a classic tag match with Terry Knight and Eddie Golden versus Bad Attitude. So we gave a really good buffet of professional wrestling, and the promoters knew what they were doing. They had a great system running, and like you said, for a couple of years there, it was the pinnacle and the height of independent wrestling, and we loved it. We were a gang. We were somewhat a cult. I fail to understand why there's not been a documentary about this particular promotion, because of the level of talent. Not myself. I'm way down the list, but there's a dozen workers that came out of that company that went on to become somewhat massive, if not monumental figures. AJ Styles, of course, being the number one and the biggest of all time from our company. He started there. He trained there. I was at his first training session. I was like his 4th ever match. I think I'm one of the only people to ever have a Falls Count Anywhere hardcore match against AJ Styles, because why in the hell would you risk that investment? But we were really, truly a group that believed in what we were doing, and we loved it so much down there in Georgia. It didn't matter that we didn't have air conditioning in the first 2 years of the TV studio. We didn't have indoor plumbing. The people still showed up. They bought merchandise. They met in the parking lot, and it was truly the most fun. Everything I've ever needed for my entire career, I learned from those couple of years being a part of Wildside. Everything. That's the reason I've had a 30-year career. It's the reason I've been a success. It all goes back to Steve Martin inviting me to Cornelia.
That's excellent. And so the white trash character, you said that was an APW creation.
Yes.
I know the background story of this, because I didn't want you to be called white trash. I wanted you to be Grubsnake.
Steve Grubsnake.
Steve Grub, because you were Steve Flamingo. And I was like, no, it should be Steve Grubsnake. Because Grubsnake was what that was our affectionate term for Keensburg folks. Sorry, Keensburg. The neighboring towns kind of ate your lunch there.
Taking a beating today.
I know, yeah. 0 for 3 right now. But the idea was the same, and it was like, from the from the trailers of Union Beach, New Jersey, or from the trailers of Keensburg, New Jersey, Steve Grubsnake, I remember being on the phone with you and saying, like, if this is the direction you're going in, this is kind of like, you can be grungy, you can be, no holds barred, if that's the angles that they're putting you in. But how did that pivot into white trash?
Boogaloo Crew pulls me aside and they say, you're not happy. They said, we know you're not happy. You're doing the job. You're doing what you're supposed to do, but you need another gimmick. And they had enough power as the most talented workers in SCW and APW for the most part at that time, maybe other than Ron Killings, to go to the promoters and push some pencil, use some influence, as they say. And so they talked to the promoters and said, the guy can work. The guy can sell. I think we can make money off of him. Let him do his thing. And they came to me. The promoter came to me and he said, when you show up next Friday, I want you to be the character that you want to be. And I talked to you that week, and the name White Trash had not been completely solidified yet. We were still working on that. But I went home. I cut up a pair of jean shorts. I mean, this is so... I'll call myself a mark in this situation because I was such a mark in this moment, but it was where my wrestling soul was at. A cut up pair of jeans, a pair of combat boots, a ripped up band t-shirt, and yes, a leather jacket for the first couple of shows before I finally got wise and dumped that off because I looked like, well, everybody else in pro wrestling at the time. My hair wasn't very long yet, so I just started kind of spiking it up, but I just came in that way. I sat in the locker room. I had a garbage can with me, and they said, you look like the trash man. And I said, oh, God.
Oh, no.
And I was like, here we go again. And then we started talking about it, and it was Scotty Wren who pushed the white trash thing through. And he said, no, you need to be white trash. He goes, it works. He goes, look, man, there's all these stickers at the store. You go to Hot Topic. You can buy all your own merch real easy from there. There's T-shirts already made. He's like, it's just smart business. Just go with it. It's easy. And then, of course, another carrot from the wrestling business to help me along the way. Hey, if you decide to go with the name White Trash, Scotty Wren said he'll go under the hood tonight and he'll put you over in the main event in your first ever match as White Trash.
All right.
Again, how can I argue with someone going out of their way to help me get a gimmick that I want and then also be willing to put me over? I ran with it and I never stopped. And that was the first introduction of hardcore. South Carolina had an athletics commission that was extremely strict. And as a matter of fact, it was that first match against Scotty Wren under the hood as the Hunter, whatever that was. Right. He just asked guys at the back, did anybody got some gear I can put on? And he did. I took a power bomb on a trash can in the middle of that match, cut the back of my arm hard way, just wide open, needed massive amounts of stitches. But because I got color in the ring in South Carolina, I was in violation of the athletics commission, and the promotion actually fired me.
Oh, wow.
So my first hardcore match, my first hardcore spot got me fined by the athletic commission and got me fired by Southern Carolina Wrestling. And I'm going to tell you, that's one of 2 times I sat in a parking lot and cried my eyes out in my car for a solid hour before somebody came up and said, kid, do you realize what just happened? And I said, yeah, my career ended. And they said, no, your career was just made.
Yeah.
Go to the next promotion and just ride the reputation. You got fined by the athletic commission and fired by your first promotion. You main evented twice. You had a heavyweight title match. And when you changed gimmick, you turned heel and left them.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. You're now, now you're an outlaw. Now you're a,
right.
I
fit the gimmick now,
and absolutely. Now you're living that white trash, sort of street urchin existence. Did you ever? And we'll get into the rivalries you've had and the career in a bit. But did you ever have heat with? Because wasn't XPW? They had a white trash guy.
White trash Johnny Webb.
Johnny Webb.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Johnny Webb. Only in the PWI 500. That's the
okay.
That's the only place we ever had heat with each other because no one could tell which one of us it was that was in the PWI 500 because it just said white trash and it didn't have any other information. So, I always claimed it to be my spot at 400, whatever it was. If it's that big a deal to this day, Johnny Webb can have it, but never had the chance to meet for the unification of the white trash name. And I didn't think I was coming up with anything original, but I did do some diligence at the very beginnings and scan as many wrestling magazines and publications and other reports from shows as I could. And I honestly did not ever see white trash Johnny Webb on anything when I decided to run with it. So I did try at least to do some homework and research. It wasn't as easy as it is nowadays, but I went to the Barnes and Nobles or whatever bookstore I used to go to, and I searched all the mags I used to run through and checked all the show reports. And I didn't see a white trash Johnny Webb, but I will tell you, over the years, friends of mine from the wrestling industry, from Wildside in particular, Jeff G. Bailey, have reached out to me under anonymous profiles, pranking me and absolutely ribbing the bejesus out of me about this is white trash Johnny Webb, and I've got heat with you. So the joke carries on. He'll try to catch me on social media every once in a while with some new profile. Hey, I don't know if you know this, but you stole my gimmick. That's
right. Yeah. Well, that's clever.
On from there.
It's funny that you bring up the attorney Jeff G. Bailey, because again, like I'm going off the tapes that you started to send me with the TV shows, and that was a character that he was the main heel manager in the territory, in the NCW.
Everywhere he went.
Well, everywhere he went, but like mostly from what I had seen on those tapes was him on your shows. And you were kind of like the thorn in his side in a lot of the like undercard angles. So it would be like, you're starting a match with AJ, or you're starting a match with like, anybody else that's like under his employ. And he's got that 2-minute promo that he's cutting, and he's like, white trash he's house show talent. And he's deriding you, and then your music hits. Here you come with the stop sign and with a manic energy, and it would be like if Jeff G. Bailey would be like running in place, like hiding, like trying to get behind his guy, and he was bad mouthing him, but 2 seconds later he's running from you, which I think was a great dynamic, and I think for a while there, I was kind of like, man, WCW could pick him up and they could really do good stuff with him because he's got that sort of like smarmy prick Paul Heyman, Paulie Dangerously energy. And I thought he's a great foil for when you were actually a beloved babyface for the NWA Wildside, I guess, followers or audience. You were more or less the mascot, and his sort of like his presence, sort of trying to always like throw roadblocks in your way or make sure that you didn't get the recognition that you deserved, was a great interaction. Like, obviously, like, working with him had to be, a pretty rewarding experience, but like, how much input in those promos and storylines were you getting, and maybe even giving to him to get him to help, get heat on him so that you could kind of make the save and shove it in his face?
So the first night I'm in APW, I had been watching their television for a couple of weeks, knowing I was trying to get up there. I walk in the locker room and I see Jeff Bailey sitting in the corner in his attorney lawyer gimmick suit, slick back hair, all that. I walk over and I go, "Hey, aren't you Jeff G-Spot Bailey?" Which was a sign some fan had held up a couple of episodes earlier. And it was literally the only sign that had ever been held up. In the age of signs, it was the only sign that ever made it to APW in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And so, of course, I was like, make a mental note of that. That'll get you over with Jeff Bailey whenever you meet him. And I did the finger guns. I said, "Aren't you Jeff G-Spot Bailey?" And he was like, "Why, yes, I am. Who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm white trash." And he says, "Well, why don't you take a seat next to me, white trash?" Next thing I realize, he's from Columbia, South Carolina. I'm living in Anderson, South Carolina. In order to get to Cornelia, Georgia. He has to go from Columbia through Anderson down to Georgia. Right there, I think you understand the savings and the gas money and the opportunity to make someone else drive him to the show. It was cemented immediately. I would drive Jeff G. Bailey the second half of the run, and in that time, I would get to spend about 2 hours with one of the most important bookers in the company, who managed a stable of some of the top talent in the company. And that is exactly how I became his number one foil. It was the two of us coming up with ideas that could supplement the bigger parts of the card. And everyone would always go, yeah, hey, why not? That's fun. That'll take up 8-9 minutes and not be an issue for any of the, bigger talent, main eventers. And it was basically what you said. He was the tightwad CEO lawyer that wanted his company to be suits and dollar signs, and I was completely the opposite. I was all heart, no talent, passion, fire, scumbag from New Jersey, and I was going to stand up for the little guy no matter how many beatings I had to take. And that was the critical component and the key to the gimmick of white trash. And what got it over was for 2 straight years, and this gimmick has been done by many and it's been done better by a few, but for 2 straight years, I went out of that ring on my back counting the lights. And Jimmy Rivers, the old man referee, leans into me after my first appearance down at Wildside, and he goes, "Kid, you take such beatings, you don't get up. You understand me?" And like a switch went off in my head. Oh my God, that's it. I give everything to the point where I have to be rescued by medical staff, security, carried off to the back, total fallen hero type stuff. I lost for 2.5 years and never walked away from a single loss. And I sold more t-shirts than any other worker in the company during that time. I was on literally every single episode of television. Some of the bumps and spots I took got featured on the intro to the television show, which would remain for almost 200 episodes. So the Jeff G. Bailey being the ultra smarmy heel to my ultra passionate, unskilled, untrained, terrible looking gimmick, it just played perfectly. And we had the time, and I'm telling you, we took it as seriously as anyone could. I understand that I was never more than a mid-carder, and that is fine with me because I was a mid-carder in Wildside, and I worked AJ Styles, and I worked Abyss, and I worked all of these incredible wrestlers, held a belt or two, and got to be on TV for over 150 episodes in my career. I could not imagine a better person to work with. The only reason JGB didn't make it any farther than that, he had 1 or 2 opportunities with TNA. I'll use the line, he was more hardcore than European porno, and the wrestling business just wasn't prepared for it. He might have been a little too intense for some people out there. He had the genius. He had the mind for it. He could cut a promo like no other. And for anyone who's never heard a Jeff G. Bailey promo, you have got to find them. They're out there on YouTube aplenty. Trust me. He self-promotes and has for the last 30 years. They are some of the most excruciating promos. And when I had the honor of having them cut on me, it was just a pleasure. Yes, being referred to by the attorney agent Jeff G. Bailey as house show talent was a highlight. But also, after my career was ended by his menace Iceberg pushing me off the stage in the wheelchair at my final ever appearance, he did go on television and lament that, well, the stupid people that came to their shows did really appreciate me, and I did apparently make a little bit of money. So he at least felt bad about losing that money.
He lost his foil. He lost his sounding board. You mentioned belts, so you go on. You're doing a good job as the fall guy, as early show talent, the mascot, so to speak, of Wildside. But you start to team up with a guy who's still going today, and that's Tank. And you form the tag team Project Mayhem. What went on to putting you guys together? Obviously, like, pretty similar gimmicks, pretty similar styles. But what's the genesis of Project Mayhem and how you guys were put together, and then talk about some of the teams, obviously, that you worked with, as you pivoted into tag teams.
Absolutely. So as the losing streak went to like 2 years or whatever it was, they decided I was over enough to start having what we called the 5-minute match. It was the open of the show, 5 minutes, new guy every time, same result. I take a beating for 4.5 minutes. I get the stop sign, El Kabong. We take it home. People cheer. They enjoy the rest of the show. And I'm done for the night, and I get to do a run-in maybe at some point later. But we did that for a few months, and that genuinely picked up some good steam because it was a great house show gimmick, and we could run that match out there 4 or 5 nights a week in different towns. And I mean, it was the same exact thing, but it worked every time. People loved the stop sign. They loved the El Kabong. So I went on a bit of a run, and that's when my roommate at the time, the Reverend and the Dragon Dan Wilson, he would have been the Dragon Dan Wilson, ring announcer and commentator at the time. Now the Reverend, the manager of the Coven, and my old partner Hank. He approaches me and he says, "I've got this guy up in East Tennessee, and I think the two of you could have a hell of a program together." And I go, "Cool, bring him in. Let's do it." We had a battle royal on what we called the Friday night family show. It was a $5 show. It was for our trainees, and it was for families, and it was, a very watered down version of Wildside. But you would get 2 or 3 of the regulars on Saturday night, usually me because I was always in town. So we did a battle royal on a Friday night, and this was my first in-ring experience with Tank. He hit me so hard with a pie pan during the battle royal that he almost knocked me completely out. So the match is over. We're all in the back. Rev comes up to me and he says, "What'd you think, man? What, you and Tank, we'll go on like a 3-4 month program with the two of you." And I said, "Here's a better idea. I don't want to fight him. How about we become tag partners, because I don't want to die." And sometimes business decisions are business decisions, because that was it. That was truly the simplicity and the genesis of Project Mayhem coming together. Tank hit me so damn hard that I thought to myself, I'd like that guy in my corner and hitting other people for my amusement that hard. And by God, did the amusement begin from that moment on, because that dude is quite possibly, he's on the short list for toughest workers in the history. And I'm not talking about in the ring. I'm talking about locker room enforcer. I'm talking about parking lot enforcer, and the guy you don't want on your bad side. My old partner Tank is fantastic in every way, and that's why at the end of our Project Mayhem run, I decided to go out the way I went out.
Yeah, and it's like he was a unique worker in that. So he wasn't. He didn't talk. He was just sort of like, and you would cut the promos for the team and convey it, but he had that sort of like that silent menacing. And didn't he have the was he the one that had the sickle in the bag?
Sickle.
Yeah.
And the sickle in the bag.
Which is still one of the
stop him from getting it out. I would prevent him from getting it out of the bag until ultimately our big night came, and well, I allowed him to go full mayhem that particular evening.
But that's a scary weapon to like think about. It
was fantastic.
In all honesty, but it was well protected. So, but it certainly had there was an ominous energy to it. But you guys, as a team, you did end up capturing the Wildside tag titles, with lineages all the way back to the Briscoe brothers and the Andersons and countless teams from the Georgia territory. That I did like that when those belts were on you guys, it was Dan Wilson and whoever the other commentator was, Stephen Prazak. They would put that over and they would talk about, hey, these are the lineages that go back to the original Georgia territory, Georgia Championship Wrestling on TBS, and so on and so forth. And I think that was a little bit of that was a nice Easter egg. That was sort of buried into the commentary at the time. But so you had that program then with Blackout, correct?
Yes. And
traded the belts with them.
Most fantastic, my most fun run that I ever had. This was something that basically I wrote with Blackout and with the booking committee's blessing. At this point in time, we were hot. We were on a run. Hell, we even had a match for the big NWA tag titles against the New Heavenly Bodies, which that was one of my least favorite experiences in wrestling history. I mean, I'm sorry. Those guys are dicks, man. They were just dicks, you know, big timers, big egos, all that kind of stuff. Didn't want to give us anything. So made us look really stupid in our hometown, and that was kind of a tough night for us. But we did a lot of the standard, okay, here's these two guys from somewhere else, and now they're getting beaten up incredibly badly by Project Mayhem. We did a lot of those matches before Blackout arrived. Again, always looking for the antithesis, always looking for the opposite side of the coin, the other side of the yin-yang. Blackout was it. When those guys showed up from Atlanta, it just immediately became this, well, they're from the ghetto and we're from the suburbs. They're black, we're white, they're rap, we're metal. Like everything just was pointing in this easy direction that would sell. And those guys were heels, and they were starting to gain some steam and momentum. And man, could those fellas go. Originally, Homicide, now Murder One, of course, had to change the name because not the same Homicide that would be more well-known in TNA and still to this day. He changed his name to Murder One. Murder One and Rain Man, as part of Blackout from Atlanta, was just awesome. And their backer was New Jack. So that added a different, another element to it, because I had years of heat with New Jack across the Southeast, and his attempts to murder me, real happened. But to this day, I'll never forget that feeling. But yes, so New Jack was like Blackout's father figure, and he pushed them to deal with us in the way that the streets would, and that's led to the Four Corners of Pain death match, the first time Wildside ever used the term death match on their television. And man, I got to write that whole thing and work the whole thing out with those guys on the other side, and with Tank and with Andrew Thomas, who was the head referee at the time, and of course the producer of television. It was a 30-minute gore fest. I understand that it's not a lot of people's taste, but at the time it was one of the bloodiest matches that had been seen. I mean, it's been done way over the top beyond what I did that night. But the color I got that night was put over for a couple of years as one of the great color jobs of all time. Really proud of it. I don't know if I almost bled out that night or not, but it was all self-inflicted. It was all a blade job. None of it was hard way. It was just amazing. And that moment, like 20 minutes into the match, where Murder One takes the barbed wire bat to my back and he rakes, and I told him, I remember saying this to him in the alleyway outside, I said, when we get to that moment in time, you cannot hold back. You have to put that barbed wire all the way in, and you have to just tear that flesh right up. I said, this might be the most important spot of my whole life. You have to do it the way I'm asking. And he was the coolest, most laid-back dude outside the ring. He goes, homie, if you want me to do that, man, I'll do it for you. And when he does that and the referee says, do you give up? I scream, hell no. It's the biggest pop I ever got in my entire career. That crowd was bought in 20 minutes into a gore fest like they had never bought into my career before. Winning the belt a few minutes later was just the cherry on the top. It's not my best match ever, but it's by far my most high profile match. And artistically, for me as a pro wrestler that went from Heatwave 95 to introducing the hardcore title in APW to going to Cornelia to face New Jack, Ruckus, and everyone else in the hardcore scene, that was a pinnacle moment for me. And unlike every other time that I was carried away from the ring, I ran a lap in a full sprint around the ring like the most excited dog with zoomies you've ever seen, spitting blood all over everyone, high-fiving. And this is when, this is the only moment I've ever known in life I was truly over, when strangers were putting their hands out and hugging me as I was covered head to toe in blood that, well, I mean, it had been on the boardwalk more than one time. It had been down at the pier in Keyport and God knows where else.
And I remember watching the match and saying, like, I can't believe, first of all, I can't believe that you had won, even if it was a, independent tag team title. I was very proud. And I remember talking to you on the phone shortly after that and saying, but I think by the time that I talked to you, you were like, well, I got a disappointment. We lost the belts like 4 weeks later. But I remember getting a tape of the match and seeing the amount of blood that you lost. And I was like, I hope it was worth it. And I think your exact response was, it was my idea, so it was absolutely worth it. And and that's that was the I guess the pinnacle of you part of the Wildside crew, because shortly after that, you did step away, correct?
Yes. At the end of the Project Mayhem run, I used my exit actually to help put Tank up to the next level and create a whole nother 2 years worth of main event level matches and gimmicks, which I'm actually the most proud of, is the way I went out. So let me just run it down real fast.
Yeah.
So after we lost the belts, it was time to, put the rivalries away. We had done the thing with Blackout for 6 months straight. We had worked Bad Attitude, the Lost Boys. We had some pretty good programs with a lot of people. We had gotten that match with the New Heavenly Bodies, and there wasn't a lot to do for Project Mayhem going forward. So I decided superhero death time for Super Babyface. So Iceberg had become the new behemoth in NWA Wildside, and Iceberg was the being of inconceivable horror that was acquired by Jeff G. Bailey to finally put an end to the nuisance known as white trash. So I got to write this one as well. Writing your own exit in pro wrestling is the greatest thing ever, by the way. Go ahead, Mike.
And let me just interrupt you before you go. To set the scene, Iceberg is 500 pounds?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a large human being. And it was basically like, if anybody's seen White Trash on YouTube or have watched Crazy Charlie on his various podcasts, he's probably bigger than the average person. But not necessarily a you don't strike yourself as a giant behemoth. So when there's a 6'5", 500-pound human being standing across the ring from you, you look like you could fit in his goddamn pocket.
There is no doubt about that. And one of the things that played into it in the final incident was I wanted to really emphasize the size of what would become known as the being of inconceivable horror, the extinction level event, the Iceberg. Iceberg would get his own. He would get his own weapon. It would be the fruit peeler. It would be exactly like the fork of Abdullah the Butcher. It would be used to bludgeon and cut his victims to pieces. So on the final appearance ever, it was just a simple old squash tag match for Project Mayhem. Go to the back. Lots of rumblings, lots of tusslings, the sound of a broken table or two, and then the Iceberg emerges through the curtain with me already covered in blood, takes me to the ring, and of course the great job by the commentators to really tell the story of what's happening, that Tank had been taken out, and now I was going to be taken out publicly as Jeff G. Bailey lambasted me on the microphone as simply being house show talent. That was that moment. So I told Berg, we're going to use your size. And what he did, he whips me into the ring, gives me the total eclipse splash right there on the side of the ring. And again, in front of the hard cam, his size and me being squashed on the apron the way I was just made it so much more impactful. And then Berg did something he had never done before, or I don't think since. He came off the apron and put me through a table, crushing me. And supposedly crushing all of my ribs and breaking my hips. And, well, the blood capsule, while it didn't look as amazing as anyone had hoped, the giant spurt of blood that came out of me was kind of a cool TV moment. And I was stretchered out of the building, and that would be the final appearance for White Trash. Before being stretchered out, they placed the stretcher down on the promo set. Tank pulled the sickle out of his bag. He looked down at me. He looked at the camera. He looked down at me. He looked at the sickle. He grunted several times, and the camera faded to black. My career over, And then Tank becomes the world heavyweight champion as he avenges my death.
Yeah.
And Tank and Iceberg become the main event players of what would become the final years of Wildside Wrestling.
Yeah. That's again the setup led to bigger things, which again, like you said before, like he should be very proud that gave them months and almost years of main event matches, main event pair-ups, whatever it may be between the two of them. We lost him for a second there. Okay. All right. Well, Chuck's taking a break real quick.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So as we were saying, like you transition away from the ring. What's your involvement with NWA Wildside at that point?
For the most part, I end up kind of staying in touch with people, helping write a little bit. I would make a handful of special guest appearances over the years. I would, once Tank and Iceberg finished their feud, they actually became a tag team. Mm-hmm. And then once they became a tag team, it was me coming in during the big show, Hardcore Hell, and helping them secure the tag titles. And the three of us kind of having the bury the hatchet moment in the ring where I didn't know this was going to happen, but they had planned it out themselves, where they both kind of, raised my hands after they won the tag belts, and it kind of signified that I was now a part of their group and a legacy part of the company. And then after that, it was just, fun stuff, drop-ins, some special guest ring announcing. I got to be the hardcore ambassador and referee for a Masada match, and for Phil Shatter when he was starting to get running. Got to do some things with him down there. But for the most part, just wanted to stick around and help out where I could. Anytime they've ever invited me or did invite me, I made sure I showed up. I did appear in the Mega Rumble of the last ever Wildside show, Last Rites in 2006.
Okay.
Yeah, but very, very short appearance where the entire gag was that I got to eliminate Mr. Delicious, JC North, one more time, and our rivalry would continue for another decade as he and I worked each other on house shows like 30-something times.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm sure there's one more in us, but that would be the extent of it, and then I would utilize that part of my life to get into radio, and then I would use the wrestling part of my life to do one of the greatest radio gimmicks I ever did, which had me appearing on a TNA pay-per-view. Yeah,
tell the people how that all came to be, because that is it's another arm of your legacy that got you national coverage by being part of TNA and being featured with a picture. You doing a very beautiful moonsault from that TNA show was in Pro Wrestling Illustrated. So talk about that a little bit.
Oh, happy to. And that was a Terry Funk-esque moonsault off the second rope at Nashville Municipal Auditorium at TNA Slammiversary 2006. I had started working in radio out here in Nashville, and I had kind of put wrestling completely behind me and was looking to pursue my future career as a talk show host when I came up with a way to get over in the radio business, which was, hey, there's this TNA pay-per-view coming, and we're a radio station, and I'm crazy. So why don't we challenge TNA to a wrestling match at their pay-per-view? And everyone in the meeting looked at me, and they were like, what? Huh? I had, of course, an ace up my sleeve in the situation. I happened to know the producer of TNA, who was my former referee, Andrew Thomas, who happened to be my best friend and lived in the apartment just down the building from me. So it was pretty easy to say, all right, Andrew, here's what's going to happen. Because he had no choice. I had beaten him up many times before, and I would do it many times after. So I said, the radio station's going to call your whoever, the office, and they're going to start asking for things. And I said, you're going to get to their ear and you're going to tell them we're doing this. And that was it. So the radio station fully expects to be shot down. And they're basically just saying, yeah, okay, we'll call, we'll ask, but whatever, let's come up with a different plan. Next day I come in and they're like, you're not going to believe this. They said, not only can you have a match on the pay-per-view, but it's going to be against Tracy Brooks, and they're going to provide 3 of their regular main event talent, Kevin Nash, Jeff Jarrett, and Sting, to be your coaches. So you'll do bits with them leading up to the show on the radio. So these guys would come on the radio and teach me how to beat Tracy Brooks. And so I went from not being on air in Nashville, Tennessee, to being featured on the air weekly in one of the hottest wrestling cities of all time.
Yeah,
and
really.
Guys like Kevin Nash and Jeff Jarrett and Sting being the guys giving me the rub and getting me over on the radio. Now, this never would have happened in the wrestling business, but it's suddenly happening on the radio. Showed up the day of Slammiversary. People were like, hey, we recognize you. And I was like, yep, I used every tool in the book to work every one of you to get on this show today. And now here I am.
Like a ghost.
There, right. I just appeared out of nowhere. And here's the moment of moments. You referenced the moonsault. As I'm walking through the back, AJ Styles is sitting there on a crate holding court, as he would be and should be doing. And I stop and he looks at me and he goes, trash. And I go, AJ? He goes, in the first match as always? And I said, yes. In the main event as always? And he goes, of course I am. And then he looks at me and he goes, you're going to do the moonsault tonight, right? And I go, no. And he goes, yeah, do the moonsault tonight. And I went, okay. And then I almost landed on my head on top of Tracy Brooks, and I almost killed myself in front of the largest crowd I had ever wrestled in front of on pay-per-view. But it all worked out. I got to kiss Tracy Brooks as part of the finish. I have a record of 0-1 in TNA. I lost at Slammiversary, and I went in the back and partied with Devon Dudley while Raven occupied the massage table for approximately 4 hours without working a single spot that night. That's how you know I was really in the golden age of TNA. Dixie Carter even thanked me for my performance. I was touched by that.
There you go. You're getting to do radio angles with the Chosen One.
It got over huge,
and that's a lot of fun. That's a great, like, you know, quasi post retirement from the ring spot to be in. It's classic Southern wrestling at its finest when you're like, we're going to have an angle with the guy from the radio, and we're not going to smarten anybody up that he knows what he's doing, but then when he shows up here, he's going to drop jaws. Did you wrestle that night as White Trash, or were you Crazy Charlie?
Crazy Charlie.
Okay. Right.
I wore a radio station T-shirt, but I did wear my same old camo shorts and the classic boots as always. So
okay.
There was at least half of the gimmick was out there in the ring, but I just wore a radio station T-shirt. And there was another radio station in town that was, I don't know, 50 times the size of my little radio station that could. And they had Frank Wycheck and all these other gimmicks on the show that night. He got hit with a guitar by Jeff Jarrett. And it was my match that people talked about here in town the next day that got over more than anything. It boosted my radio career to levels that I never thought I would actually get to. And it was all thanks to, once again, the glory and the power and the magic of professional wrestling. All I had to do was take a couple of bumps for a woman that was in Playboy and then make out with her in front of 5,000 people and take a pin. It was magic. And I had 30 free tickets, and I invited every person that worked in Wildside and said, won't you please come and see my pay-per-view debut here? Here's a free ticket, courtesy of White Trash.
always the generosity and the give back when it comes to the man who was the mascot of Wildside. And then there were a few Wildside reunion shows, if I remember correctly. Were you part of those? In on like
2017? Yes.
Okay. All right.
That was the big one, and it was legitimately fantastic. I don't know that I've ever had a night in the entertainment industry like that. I mean, there was 50, 60 alums there. The fans really turned out. It was just a great love night for pro wrestling, and everybody got a chance to go out there one more time at the old Mud Creek School gymnasium before they tore it down, and that was a great thing to get to be a part of one last time. And we all followed Bill Behrens' rules, which was no previous beef, no dope in the parking lot, and no booze in the locker room. Those were his 3 rules for the reunion show, and he said if we could all live by those 3 rules, we could have a good time, and we put on a hell of a show. And again, I'll say it just for somebody out there, please make the documentary about the Wildside days in Cornelia, Georgia. You will not be sad about hearing those stories. I mean, my God, there's some good times from then. I mean, if you haven't heard the story of the sinister minister getting set on fire on an actual gravestone in an actual graveyard before going to jail that night for driving the wrong way down the highway. Yes, that's right. A man with a blacked out Cadillac, black tinted windows, Florida license plate that says "A Devil," wearing a red suit with his eyebrows pointing straight up and all of his Church of Satan jewelry on, drunk as hell, driving down rural 441 in Georgia the wrong way. I swear to you, fellas, it's the night the devil actually went down to Georgia, and some deputy has a story of saying that's what he pulled over. Fellas, you won't believe what I just pulled over. The actual devil. Yeah. The only thing he didn't have was the fiddle.
Well, I'm sure he would have produced a little fiddle at some point, because Jim Mitchell certainly is he's a colorful character, and hearing stories and just like that, and seeing him in shoot interviews talk about like his wild outside of the ring antics are the stuff of legend. So I'm glad you got to rub elbows with a fellow crazy man like that during your career.
I was his driver for several shows, so.
Well, I'm sure, yeah.
I had the full Jimmy experience. And I got to be honest, I still feel dirty.
Yeah, well, he's, again, he's got a reputation and a story probably to back everything up with. Before we get out of here, and before we wrap up your career, we certainly want to talk about what you currently do with the Nashville Predators and with local hockey in the Nashville area. So give us a little bit of the current working situation for Crazy Charlie, a.k.a. White Trash.
I certainly do appreciate that. And listen, everything that we've talked about so far is the building blocks of everything that became successful in my career. Going to Wildside and finding a way to not only survive in a locker room with that much talent, but thrive in an environment like that, the pressure cooker that it was being on that television show. It taught me what I needed. It taught me about baby faces and heels. It taught me about heat and comebacks. It taught me about angles. It taught me about who goes over and why they go over. And I took every single one of those elements. I was a sponge my entire time that I was there. I showed up early. I stayed late. I wasn't always training in the ring, but I was always listening, especially to the people on the booking committee, especially to the managers, the people that had been there and done that. I was absorbing everything, every piece of knowledge and wisdom. It's the greatest education you can get in your entire life if you can get that deep into pro wrestling and pro wrestling psychology. I utilized every single one of those things that I've learned to go on for the next 25 years now and have a very successful broadcasting career. I've won awards that I stopped counting a long time ago. The biggest would have been Producer of the Year in the 40th largest market in the nation. That was a huge achievement for me. Also getting my own talk show on Sirius XM, being an international talk show host with 30 million plus listeners, these types of things, 10 million views on my podcast, over 150 episodes of pro wrestling is where it all began. I would have had none of those awards. I would have had none of these achievements and accomplishments if I didn't learn how to work that initial wrist lock, that initial hold, that drop kick, and learn what a gimmick is and a character is and how psychology truly works when you want to build an entertainment platform. I've taken all of it now 30 years later, and I've created my own company in the Renegades of Puck, and I'm out here and I'm about to transition and pivot into something that's going to feel a whole lot like the old shoot wrestling video days. So I'll tease it like that for now, but I'll say this. There are stories out there that need to be told. There are stories out there that are dying to be told. And I'm the type of person to go out there and find those stories. So we're going to start in the hockey community. We're going to get deep. We're going to talk to the guys who threw hands. We're going to talk to the guys that were fourth liners. We're going to talk to the guys that never made it, the has-beens, the never was. We're going to find out the stories out there, because just like the stories we've talked about here tonight in pro wrestling, those stories exist in the hockey universe, in the hockey world, and they're not being told. And we're losing those types of legendary moments and stories all the time. I'm going to present them in a great package, and I'll be the host of it, and I'll bring you those stories. I can't wait for you guys to get a chance to see it and experience it, because the passion is more important than the precision at this point. I've worked my whole broadcasting life to try to be a stats guy, a numbers guy, a names and the places guy. I want to disregard that now, and I want the feelings. I want the stories, and I want to get to what makes people tick behind the particular subjects that I'm interested in. I think I'm the right guy for it. I think I'm somebody who can bring the presentation, the passion, the energy, the fire, the fury, whatever it is. You jump in the trenches with me, and we're going to get a good story out of it. So, fellas, I cannot thank you enough for letting me tell my story. I'm not one of these workers who is everywhere like modern wrestling, shooting all over AEW, shooting all over the WWE. It's a new generation. It's their generation. It's for them now. It's for them to critique. It's for them to explore. It's for them to learn. I watch it. I appreciate it. I don't understand all of it these days. Some of it reminds me of the old school. Some of it is stuff that I thought would never happen or never even be possible in the wrestling business. But I feel like my tiny little slice of the story is something that's worth hearing and worth telling. And I can't thank you enough, Mike. You've been there since my first day of training. And man, to be able to share these thoughts, these stories, and come on here and, be treated with a little bit of respect as a veteran worker. It sure as hell makes me feel good here at the end of the career. After all, got in a magazine, got on a pay-per-view, got in the PWI 500, appeared in one of the hottest indies for a couple of years. I did things. I want to be remembered. So thanks for letting me tell my story.
You bet. And again, everything comes full circle, and it's an honor to be able to say that I know you, that you have pivoted your career in an upswing of a way, and we're able to utilize, as you just said, that history of being an in-ring performer and an on-camera performer for a television show, and make that into what's now what from, and I don't want to steal a phrase, but it does sound a lot like a passion project that you're working on, that you've certainly thrown a lot of your energy into and your spirit into, and it's a great success. For anybody that's listening to our podcast, or who even listened to the Captain and Madden podcast that we did with you a couple weeks back, where we talked hockey. Get on board. Like anything that Crazy Charlie does and puts out there, it's a labor of love, and he throws a lot of energy and knowledge and tenacity into. So definitely check out Renegades of Puck everywhere on socials. Just search for it, and you'll find the videos, you'll find the shorts, you'll find any of the written content that Charlie and his team do on that end of things. And it's certainly it's coincidental, but it's memorable that it comes from the very beginnings of pro wrestling. So yeah, that's why we're glad to have you featured as our first interview guest. I know this is a lot of you and me talking, and Tom, you've been patiently part of the
no, this is like a
part of the podcast.
This is like a history lesson for me, almost. Yep. NWA Wildside is not like the era of the independents that I'm most familiar with. So getting to hear all these old stories and like things that I'm going to now go out and seek to watch. It was awesome, and we truly appreciate you telling your story here.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Tom. Appreciate that, man.
And we will. Spoiler alert: we will have you on for our next episode, where we're going to be we're talking about a subject that's near and dear to your heart. We're going to be talking about hardcore and death match wrestling. So we appreciate you sticking around for the next episode that we've got coming up, and always being this mythical creature that is referenced time and time again. Whenever I meet somebody that I learn that they're a wrestling fan, one of the first sentences out of my brain, out of my mouth is, "Hey, I got a guy who worked in pro wrestling, so and that is you. You were my connection to that world. So
I leave
be
you
proud.
with two things. Then
Mm-hmm.
I leave you with two things to close this episode of the Basement out.
Sure.
Let me see. Do I remember what those two things are suddenly? Oh yes, one. It's all true.
Mm-hmm.
That's one.
Yes.
And two. Joey. Janela. Pool Ave. When we gonna get down in the middle of Pool Avenue and settle this thing Union Beach street fight style?
Union Beach versus Hazlitt. Tom, you gotta the friend of the show, Joey Janela, may have to finally put White Trash out of his misery. Now there's a little trash talking.
He could end me in my fourth decade in the business. The only way I need to be ended is at the hands of another from the shore.
Yes, right.
I'm ready. I am ready. This is Highlander style at this point.
And it's got to be an opening match too. We can't have you in the main event.
We'll try and facilitate that for the first ever Pool Ave parking lot brawl.
Just the sounds of it, the alliteration, all I hear are cash registers rolling. Let's go.
Well, once again, Crazy Charlie, Charlie Saunier, our good friend, White Trash, the master of no half stepping, the commander of the Renegades, and the Renegades of Puck. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your input. We look forward to your insights into the next episode. And for Tom, this is Mike. We hope you guys have a great night, and we will see you all at the matches.